From Studio One in New York, it's Katie.
Are you ready for the stage? You're getting stronger every step you take. You're gonna find it in a heartbeat. Feel your feet moving through a crowded street to find your way.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming. How are you? I'm so happy to see you all. Have a seat. Welcome. We have a really big show today. I feel like I'm channeling Ed Sullivan all of a sudden. But one of my favorite couples is here from The Little Couple on TLC. Jen Arnold and Bill Klein are here. And they came on the show once before. They're back today to talk about their latest challenge, which is Jen's cancer diagnosis. But first, you're about to meet a man who has truly been to hell and back. I mean, this story is unbelievable. Imagine being accused of sexually abusing your own children and stepson and being sentenced to spend the rest of your life in prison, all for crimes you never committed. The story of one man's fight for justice is today's big conversation. Ray Spencer was an Air Force veteran, an officer with the Vancouver, Washington Police Department, and an adoring father of 2 young children. In the summer of 1984, Ray was balancing work, a new marriage, and time with the children from his first marriage, who were visiting during their summer vacation. But little did he know that summer, everything would change. While alone with Ray's new wife, Shirley, Ray's 5-year-old daughter, Katie, alluded to being touched inappropriately. Concerned, Shirley relayed the story to Ray, who went straight to the police. They began an investigation, and after questioning Katie, detectives on the case reported a shocking allegation, claiming that Katie said she'd been raped several times, and the man who did it was her own father, Ray. Then in February of 1985, detectives said there was another claim of rape against Ray, this one from Shirley's 5-year-old son named Matt. A month later, Ray's own 9-year-old son, also Matt, who had previously denied abuse, told detectives he too had been raped by his father. In May of 1985, Ray Spencer was convicted of multiple counts of rape and given the maximum punishment, 2 life sentences plus 14 years in prison. As he began serving his term, holes in the case against him started to come to light. What really happened to Ray Spencer, and how did an innocent man end up behind bars for nearly 2 decades? To help us answer that question, please welcome Ray Spencer himself. Ray, this is such a wild and very complicated story, so we're going to kind of break it down bit by bit. This whole nightmare for you started when your then wife Shirley claimed your daughter Katie, her stepdaughter, had made some references about being touched. What did she say Katie had said?
According to Shirley, she indicated that my daughter Katie had stated that her brother molested her or inappropriately touched her, an old girlfriend of mine, and her daddy.
Hearing that, you decided, I'm concerned, I'm going to go to the police.
Well, as a father, I couldn't ignore that. My assumption at the time was that daddy was someone that my ex-wife, the children's mother, was dating in Sacramento. So I did. I initiated the calls to Child Protective Services in the state of Washington, the state of California.
And suddenly, after those calls were made, you became the focus of the investigation.
Initially, Sacramento County sheriffs had investigated the case and found that they didn't feel there was any merit for it. My daughter had, which I was not aware of, but a medical exam had been completed on my daughter, and there was no sign of molestation. But a detective, Sharon Krause, at the Clark County, Washington Sheriff's Department wouldn't take Sacramento's determination that there was no molestation, so she picked up the case.
She picked up the case and she interviewed your daughter, Katie. Ultimately, you were charged with raping your daughter Katie, and then two new allegations, as we saw in the setup piece, surfaced.
Right.
One by your stepson, Matt, who was also 5 years old, just like Katie was, right? And another by your biological son, Matt, who was 9 years old at the time, right?
That's correct.
So you were convicted on May 16th, 1985, of multiple counts of rape. And you entered something, Ray, called the Alford plea. Can you explain to us what that is? I had never heard of it before.
What it is you're stating that based on the evidence that's being presented, a jury would more than likely find you guilty. It's not an admission of guilt, you're just saying that you can't prove this. Now, at this time, everything that I had for a defense, medical exams, a videotape that was hid for 25 years, and the fact that the lead detective in the case was having an affair with my wife. That was my basis for my defense, and I didn't have it. I didn't have anything.
We heard an audible gasp when you just said the detective involved in the case was having an affair with your wife. I mean, it wasn't long after you started to serve time in prison that you realized that this was going on.
I received divorce papers shortly after I went to prison, and the divorce attorney from Clark County, I knew her, so when I contacted her and asked her to handle the divorce, she said, Ray, it's all over the city. Shirley Spencer was having an affair with Sergeant Michael Davidson from the Clark County Sheriff's.
And he was the detective in charge of your case.
He was, and Sharon Krause worked directly for him.
You realized something was awry almost immediately after you started serving time. But it took 19 years for you to be released, for the governor to commute your sentence. What took so long?
That's the criminal justice system for you. I mean, I filed personally, I believe 5 appeals. I saw the parole board 5 times. And every time that I went in front of them, they said, either admit guilt or you're never going to be released.
And you refused to do that.
I refused to do that. I didn't do it.
And finally, your sentence was commuted because of all these troubling developments or revelations in your case?
Well, they started to come unraveling initially in '97. We were in federal court. We had heard about a medical exam on my daughter, but did not know that there was also one on my stepson.
And there were no signs of abuse in both of those medical exams, and yet the detectives never handed those over?
They hid those. As a matter of fact, they had 2 indexes in the sheriff's department. One showed the evidence in the case, and prominently in that first index showed that there were medical exams. 5 months later, there's another index made, and those medical exams suddenly disappeared.
What kept you going?
Once I went to prison, you know, you're stuck in a little 6 by 11 foot concrete enclosure. I was in maximum security. And I wanted to bring closure to my life because I knew I would never see daylight again. So I thought about a woman that I met when I was stationed on Guam, Norma. We didn't like each other at first. She thought I was cocky and I thought she was stuck up. And then we danced, and it was like this spark, and suddenly it was a South Sea Island love affair.
And so you reached out to her while you were in prison.
I did, not because I felt that we could put anything together, but when you have that much time on your hands, you can relive the good times, and I realized that she was the love of my life, and she's in the audience.
And in fact, yes, Ray's wife Norma is here. And Norma, I mean, hearing Ray's story, did you ever doubt his innocence?
I know him. I knew in my heart. And we'd seen each other over the years after we decided not to get married initially. So when I heard from him, initially he didn't tell me what the charges were, but I cried for 2 weeks because I knew that he was, in prison. And then when he did tell me, I said, oh, no, something's wrong with this picture, I know this man.
And you just believed that he was innocent?
I knew.
Even though your sentence was commuted and you were released from prison, you still had yet to be exonerated. But
That's true.
finally, you were. And we'll actually tell people why and how and by whom right after this. And welcome back. Ray Spencer is a former police officer from Vancouver, Washington, who spent nearly 20 years in prison after facing charges of molesting his own children. His sentence was commuted in 2004 by the governor of Washington, citing, quote, a number of troubling aspects of the investigation, including evidence of an affair between Ray's then wife and the lead investigator, and the omission of medical reports that could have been used to help prove Ray's innocence. Ray's children, Katie Tetz and Matt Spencer, are here. Welcome to both of you. Thank you all so much for coming. So this happened when you guys were pretty young. Katie, at the time, you were 5, you were 9, Matt. So what were you told about your father as you were growing up?
I actually never really knew what the charges were. I was told that he had inappropriately touched us, and I was told that he actually pled guilty to it.
And what about you, Matt?
Basically that, yeah, he had touched us inappropriately. We didn't have any of the details of how violent these accusations were. Eventually we found out that he was in prison and that he probably won't be getting out because he never admitted any guilt.
Was this just something that you accepted as fact? Did you ever think, wait, what?
You have, on the one hand, people telling you that this had happened. You have your mom saying it was so traumatic that you're blocking it out. But I'm fighting internally going, I don't remember any of this. And then it was when we were about teenagers that we started talking. I kept telling him I don't remember any of this.
And Matt, what are your recollections of that time? Because you were a bit older, right? You were 9?
Correct, I was 9. So at that point you start to really remember, you have good recall of your memories. And so for me, it was a really struggle. It was a long struggle because I just eventually realized the magnitude of what had happened and that I felt very, very responsible for it. So the guilt eventually overwhelms you.
And what was it, looking back on things, that made you make these allegations to begin with?
Detective Sharon Krause, she was the main detective on this case. She was telling us what happened. She had it sure in her mind that this is what happened, and all we have to do is go along with this, and if we go along with this, then he can get medical help. And so we honestly believed we were doing the right thing, that we were going to get our father help, not knowing that he was going to get 2 life sentences handed to him.
That's how she would position it, that he is sick, and if you say these things, then you can make him better. So here you're putting that on the shoulders of a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old, and the thing that's baffling is once I actually saw the police reports that she wrote up, it's not even vocabulary a 5-year-old would use. I didn't say those things, so that's when it really became very disturbing to me when I saw what she was actually putting in quotes.
Must have been so confusing at
Yes.
the time.
It was
Yes.
very confusing, and it took many, many years to kind of decipher on really what happened,
Yeah.
and was able to muster up enough courage to do something about it.
I know that you were the first, Matt, to get in contact with your father because you had lost touch with him, but you reached out in 2005. Why did you want to reach out to your dad, and what was it like when you first met?
Well, for me, at that point in my life, I was living my life in a spiral, and it was just so difficult to try to maintain any type of relationship, to try to even just live by my own. I just was irresponsible, had no respect for authority or anything. So I really believed that this was weighing on me subconsciously, and that I not only needed to do this for him, but I also needed to do it for myself as well.
This was after he was released from prison that you reached out?
Correct. We had a no contact rule, so we had to get that lifted and begin contact.
And Katie, I know it took you a little bit longer to follow in your brother's footsteps.
Yeah. I just emotionally was not ready for it. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. We had been told if he ever got out, he would come and kill us. So I didn't know what this was going to be, and I didn't know how to approach it, and I wasn't emotionally ready for it yet.
When you ultimately got together with your dad, when was that, and what was that like?
That was, I want to say, the first email I finally had the courage to send him, I think was August of 2007. And I just said, this is your daughter, and I have no idea what I'm supposed to say at this point, but I just want to know who you are. And he wrote back in 4 or 5 minutes. It was a very quick response, but I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say, but I just felt I needed to say something.
Were you angry?
Oh, no. They were babies. These were little kids. They took advantage of them. And then they had to live all those years without a father.
You decided you wanted to do something that would clear his name once and for all. So what did you all do?
We recanted our statements. It was kind of difficult initially because we didn't have an outlet. We didn't know where to begin. And thankfully, I was in touch with a reporter in Oregon, and he was able to put me in touch with him. And we began communicating. And the first time I went up there, I told him by the end of that week, and I said, he looked at me and he said, hey, I didn't do this. And I looked at him and I said, I know in my heart you didn't do this, and that's why I'm here. And we began the process, and it was a very long process.
So 20 years of your life wiped out. What happened to the woman you were married to at the time, Shirley? What happened to the detective she was involved with? And what happened to Sharon Krause, who, according to your son, Matt, badgered him until he would make these accusations? What happened to all these people?
We just finished the federal civil rights case. The jurors held that Krause fabricated all these reports. Davidson, as her supervisor, co-signed them. The jury did hand down an award.
They awarded you $9 million.
They did.
And the county is contesting it. Do you think you will get the money?
We will. You can't just say, I'm taking my football and go home because you don't like a jury's decision. This is the basis of this country's criminal justice system. The jury spoke.
Incidentally, we reached out to Clark County and the former investigators, Sharon Krause and Michael Davidson, as well as Shirley Hansen, for statements, but they all declined to comment. Ryan Smith is an ABC News legal analyst. And Ryan, I think people hearing this story wonder, how could this happen?
Well, hearing their story, to me, it seems to be one of the worst cases of malicious investigation I've ever seen. And it shows you not only how tough it is to prove a negative, but how tough it is to prove that a police report is wrong. Now, the majority of police officers out there are wonderful, but every once in a while, you have somebody who can put something in a report, hide something, not disclose something, and you give that to prosecutors. They will then take that case and go with it, treating that as fact. So prosecutors then go forward, and what can you do to back that up? There's another sidelight to this too. In Ray's home state, there is a child hearsay law. So if he would have gone to trial, he wouldn't have been able to cross-examine Katie or Matt on the stand. Now, that's a tough thing to do in the first place, but at the same time, I hear Katie and Matt and their stories and hear how maybe on the stand, it would have become clear maybe that, hey, this never happened, but he wasn't given that opportunity.
Or his attorneys.
Yeah. So all of these things stacking up against you is how this happens. One thing I say is incredible. Ray could have backed down. He could have said, yes, I admit guilt, stop the fight, but it shows you how important it is to fight when you are telling the truth.
What is your relationship like with your father today, and do you all feel as if you can make up for lost time?
It's incredible today. I mean, I have never had such a weight lifted off of me just from this whole process. You can see it in his face. We're so very close now, and he's such an incredible man. I mean, who gets a PhD in prison? Nobody ever has. This man does. I mean, most people go into prison and they come out a monster. He came out just an impeccable human being.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for sharing this story with us. I guess in many ways it's a cautionary tale for people and will inspire people when there is injustice to never stop fighting.
Yes.
Ray Spencer, thank you. Matt Spencer, Katie Tetz, Norma, thank you as well. And Ryan Smith, new here at ABC, thank you for your perspective as well. And we'd love you to join the conversation by going to our website at katiecouric.com. Let us know what you think about Ray's story. We'll be back right after this.